A long time ago, humans and wizards lived together peacefully. But one day, a wizard named Mordred wanted to destroy the Kingdom of England. He used dark magic and attacked Camelot, the last strong kingdom in England. At that time, Mordred brought huge elephants to carry his army. Upon knowing that, the King of England, Uther Pendragon, wanted to stop Mordred. Uther had a special sword called Excalibur, which was very powerful. Uther's younger brother, Vortigern, told Uther to give up because Mordred was too strong. But Uther didn't listen and decided to fight. There, Uther bravely jumped onto the back of one of Mordred's giant elephants and went to Mordred's base. Outside, General Bedivere led the army to fight Mordred's troops. And Uther, riding the elephant, faced Mordred directly. With one powerful strike, Uther's sword Excalibur broke through Mordred's magic shield and defeated him. After that, the giant elephants, which were controlled by Mordred's dark magic, became free and walked away. When the battle was over, Vortigern suggested killing all the wizards because he thought they were dangerous. But Commander Bedivere and a man named Gus, who were both loyal to Uther, disagreed. They believed not all wizards were bad. And Merlin, a wizard, had helped them by creating the sword Excalibur, and without it, they wouldn't have been able to defeat Mordred. There, Uther agreed with his commanders and decided that he didn't want any more wars. Long story short, Vortigern was very angry and decided to take over the kingdom. He went to a secret cave to meet some evil sirens and sacrificed his wife to gain more power. And Uther, who realized what was happening, quickly took his wife and son, Arthur, and tried to escape from the palace. Uther told them to get on a boat, but suddenly, a demon knight appeared and killed Uther's wife. Then, Uther was also killed by the demon knight. However, little Arthur managed to escape by hiding in the boat, which took him to the city of Londinium. There, 3 women found Arthur and took him to a place where they lived. As the day goes by, Arthur grew up working hard and saving money. The streets of Londinium taught him how to survive. He even took part in street fights to earn money. As he got older, Arthur became the leader of the place where he grew up and was known as the toughest guy in Londinium. Lately, Arthur kept having dreams about the demon knight, but he thought they were just bad dreams and didn't remember his past. Meanwhile, Vortigern had become a cruel king. He was building a huge tower near his palace. One day, the river near the tower dried up, and people saw the sword Excalibur stuck in a rock at the bottom. Everyone tried to pull the sword out, but no one could do it. This made Vortigern worried. Then, he went to the sirens and asked why the sword appeared now, just as the tower was almost complete. The sirens told him that Uther's son, who was now grown up, would come to reclaim the throne. They also told Vortigern to find this young man and kill him, so that the powerful sword Excalibur would belong to him. One day, soldiers led by Jack came to the place where Arthur lived. Jack said they were looking for a rebel who was hiding there. There, Jack described what the rebel looked like, and when Arthur saw that the person was there, he decided to hand the rebel over because he didn't want any trouble. Afterward, Jack invited Arthur and his friends, Backlack and Wet Stick, to talk. Jack explained that the rebel they just caught was named Goosefat Bill. Turns out, Arthur had been paying Jack to keep his place safe, but this time, Jack said he couldn't protect him anymore. Jack had heard that Arthur had gotten into a fight with some Viking soldiers at the docks. Arthur explained that the Vikings had hurt one of the women working at his place, so he fought them. But Jack reminded Arthur that the Vikings were protected by the king, and because of this, Arthur was in serious trouble. Jack told him there was nothing he could do to help. Meanwhile, at the palace, General Mercia reported that all the young men in the country had tried to pull the sword Excalibur from the stone, but none had succeeded. At that time, Vortigern told him to focus on finishing the construction of the tower instead. That night, royal soldiers came to Arthur's place again. Wet Stick warned Arthur to run away. On his way, Arthur ran into some royal soldiers. They didn't recognize him and noticed that he didn't have a stamp on his hand, which showed he hadn't tried to pull the Excalibur sword yet. So, they took Arthur and other young men without the stamp onto a ship. They were all taken to try pulling out the sword. When they arrived, the young men took turns trying to pull the Excalibur sword from the stone, but none could do it. And Arthur, feeling impatient, cut in line. When he grabbed the sword with both hands, the ground started to shake. To everyone's surprise, Arthur managed to pull the sword out. But right after he fainted, when Arthur woke up, he found himself in a prison cell with Vortigern. There, Vortigern told him that he was happy to finally meet his nephew. And Arthur, having forgotten his past, said he didn't know who Vortigern was. Vortigern then explained that only Uther's descendant could pull the sword from the stone. But Arthur still denied it, insisting he was just an ordinary guy from Londinium. Vortigern replied that Arthur would see the truth during the upcoming ceremony. Meanwhile, in a hidden rebel base, Bedivere, the leader of the rebels, met with a mage sent by Merlin. Both of them had heard that Arthur, the son of King Uther, was now grown up. Then, they made a plan to rescue him. Long story short, Vortigern planned to execute Arthur in front of the people. At that time, Arthur couldn't fight back because Vortigern threatened to hurt everyone Arthur cared about if he tried to resist. So, Arthur was brought out to face the crowd. Shortly after, General Mercia asked Arthur to show the power of the Excalibur sword, but Arthur stayed silent because he didn't know how. It seemed like Arthur would be put to death for fooling everyone. Just as Arthur was about to be executed, Mage used magic to control an eagle, causing a distraction. She also made the horses and dogs go wild, attacking the soldiers and creating chaos. In the confusion, two rebels, Percival and Rubio, rescued Arthur and gave him the Excalibur sword. Soon after, they quickly fled with Arthur, crossing the river and riding on horseback for several days until they reached the rebel hideout. There, Arthur met Bedivere and Goosefat Bill. Still, Arthur didn't believe he was a king's descendant. He wanted to go back home, but Goosefat Bill told him that the brothel where Arthur grew up had been destroyed. Bedivere then urged Arthur to unlock the power of the Excalibur sword, but Arthur said he couldn't. To push him, Goosefat Bill hit Arthur, making him angry. And Arthur, now filled with emotion, fought back and hit Goosefat Bill. Meanwhile, Percival and Rubio took the sword to try fighting with it. Suddenly, Arthur saw the demon knight again and fainted. The next day, Mage spoke to Arthur and explained that fear was controlling him, stopping him from using the sword's power. Mage offered a solution to help Arthur get rid of his fear. She told Bedivere that Arthur had to go to the Dark Land to learn how to control the Excalibur sword's true power. Shortly after, Mage and Bedivere took Arthur to the portal leading to the Land of Darkness. Mage told Arthur to bring his sword to a tower in the Land of Darkness. Afterward, Arthur entered the Dark Land and was attacked by huge, dangerous creatures. With great effort, Arthur pushed forward, trying to reach the tower on his own. After facing many challenges, Arthur finally made it to the tower. When he placed the sword on an altar, he suddenly saw visions from his past. He watched as the demon knight killed his mother and saw his father, King Uther, fighting the demon knight. Young Arthur had hidden in a boat back then. Arthur then saw his father use Excalibur to stab himself, turning into stone. It was then revealed that the demon knight who killed his parents was actually Vortigern. Suddenly, Arthur fainted from the shock. Moments later, Mage and Bedivere brought Arthur back to the rebel base. When Arthur woke up, he told Mage that while in the Land of Darkness, he saw many bodies with the same bracelet that Mage wore. Mage explained that those were her people killed by Vortigern. Arthur also realized that the tower in the Land of Darkness looked just like the one Vortigern was building. Mage explained that the tower was a source of power. If Vortigern finished building it, he would become as powerful as the wizard Mordred. That's why the Excalibur sword had appeared to stop Vortigern before he could complete the tower. Soon after, Bedivere explained that long ago, the wizard Mordred teamed up with Vortigern to overthrow Uther. Mordred killed the king of the wizards and stole his magic staff to unlock dark powers. But Merlin stole the staff and turned it into the sword Excalibur. Merlin then destroyed the tower and gave the sword to the Lady of the Lake, who passed its power to Uther and his descendants. That night, Wet Stick, Backlack, and Backlack's son, Blue, came to see Arthur. They told him that the royal army had destroyed the brothel. Some of the people Arthur knew were killed, and others escaped. Hearing this, Arthur became emotional and decided to fight back against Vortigern. There, He gathered the rebels to plan how to fight Vortigern. Then, they started by causing trouble by sinking boats that carried building supplies and blocking the river. After that, they freed the slaves and they burned the gunpowder storage in the palace. Seeing all this, Vortigern realized that the rebels were now openly fighting against him. He decided to go to Londinium in 3 days to meet with the barons and gather more troops. Meanwhile, Vortigern's assistant, Maggie, went to the rebel hideout to inform them of Vortigern's plan to go to Londinium. With this information, Arthur and the rebels went to Londinium and looked for a good spot to shoot Vortigern from far away. They found a place, but it was a bit far from the docks. Luckily, Goose Fat Bill was a great shot, even from a long distance. Long story short, Vortigern's group finally arrived at the Londinium docks. From a distance, Goose Fat Bill spotted Mercia. Turns out, Goose Fat Bill had a long-standing grudge and really wanted to kill Mercia. On the other hand, Vortigern had already figured out that Maggie was working with the rebels. He was using this opportunity to lure the rebels out. In the building, Arthur and his group saw Vortigern coming off the boat, but Arthur felt something was off. He told Goose Fat Bill not to shoot. As it turned out, the person they saw wasn't actually Vortigern, but someone else pretending to be him. However, Goose Fat Bill, still angry, shot an arrow at Mercia instead. Then Mercia fell immediately and chaos broke out. Arthur and the others quickly tried to escape. During the fight, Backlack was stabbed in the stomach. He told everyone else to go ahead, promising to catch up. Arthur and the group struggled to get away. Arthur suggested they head to George's fighting arena, where there was a sewer tunnel that led to the river. Rubio bravely stayed behind to fight the royal soldiers, giving the others a chance to escape. After a long journey, Arthur and his friends finally made it to George's arena. There, Arthur urged them to use the sewers to escape, but George refused. He and the others wanted to stay and fight the royal soldiers until the end. As the royal troops fired arrows from above, Mage used magic to control crows to disrupt the archers. Goose Fat Bill told Arthur to run and escape while they held off the soldiers. The enemy soldiers finally broke through. Seeing the large number of them, Arthur couldn't let his friends be killed. Arthur then gripped the Excalibur sword with both hands, and suddenly, it felt like he was taken over by something powerful. With one powerful swing, Arthur defeated all the enemy soldiers. Everyone who saw this began to believe even more that Arthur was the true heir of King Uther Pendragon, the rightful ruler of the kingdom. Arthur and his friends then hid in an inn, knowing they had to leave the city quickly. Outside, Blue found his injured father, Backlack, and they went to the hiding place together. In the streets, after seeing Arthur's strength with the Excalibur sword, the people started to stand up and fight the royal soldiers. On the other hand, Blue and Backlack eventually reached the inn where the others were hiding. There, Arthur urged them to leave right away, but Backlack wanted to rest for a bit. He told his son Blue to go with Arthur to the boat. After Arthur and the group left, Vortigern and his soldiers suddenly arrived at the inn. Outside, Blue decided to return and check on his father. He was shocked to see Vortigern there. Vortigern grabbed a knife and threatened Blue, demanding he tell him where Arthur and the others were hiding, or he would be killed. Just then, Arthur appeared, holding Vortigern's men hostage. Backlack shouted, telling Arthur to take Blue and run. Arthur took Blue, leaving behind Backlack, who was killed by Vortigern. Shortly after, Arthur and the group boarded a boat and disappeared into the mist. The next day, feeling hopeless, Arthur left and threw the Excalibur sword into the sea. Confused and lost, he ran through the forest until he collapsed in a puddle. Suddenly, he was pulled into the water by the Lady of the Lake. Moments later, the Lady of the Lake shows Arthur a vision of a terrible future if he doesn't stop Vortigern. She tells him that only Arthur can prevent this disaster. Arthur then returns to the real world with the Excalibur sword in his hand. Later, his friends meet up with him. George explains that news of Arthur's appearance has inspired people all over the country to start a rebellion. They are all fighting for Arthur. Bedivere also encourages Arthur to join them in the fight. Arthur agrees and tells everyone to prepare for an attack on the palace. Soon after, they head back to the rebel base, but when they arrive, they find everyone dead. Waiting for them is John, the commander of the royal army. John delivers a message from Vortigern, saying that if Arthur wants to save Blue and Mage, he must surrender at the palace. Later, Bedivere goes to the palace to hand over the Excalibur sword. He tells Vortigern that Arthur will surrender, but only if Mage and Blue are freed. Bedivere says Arthur is powerless without Excalibur. Vortigern agrees to release Mage, but he keeps Blue as a hostage, saying he'll release him only after Arthur surrenders. Once freed, Mage performs a ritual to protect Arthur. Arthur then heads to the palace to surrender. Meanwhile, Mage sends an eagle carrying a snake to drop it inside the palace. When Arthur arrives, his hands are tied, and Vortigern prepares to kill him with the Excalibur sword. But suddenly, the snake appears. Vortigern swings the sword at the snake, but the sword gets stuck in a pole and won't come out. Suddenly, a giant snake appeared and went on a rampage, killing all the royal soldiers. After all the soldiers were gone, the snake quietly left. Arthur then untied himself and easily pulled out the Excalibur sword. Realizing he couldn't win against Arthur, Vortigern went to the sirens for help again. This time, he sacrificed his only daughter so that he could turn into the demon knight. Outside, Bedivere and the others started fighting back. Arthur fought through the royal army to reach the tower where Vortigern was. When the soldiers saw the power of Excalibur, they surrendered to Arthur. Finally, Arthur made it inside the tower, but suddenly, he was pulled into another dimension where he faced the demon knight who had killed his parents. At that time, the fight was intense, and Arthur struggled against the demon knight's great power. During the battle, Arthur saw a vision of Uther. There, Uther told Arthur that he had given him the Excalibur sword. With renewed strength, Arthur stood up again to fight. This time, he was able to match the demon knight's power and even injured him. Shortly after, Arthur attacked again and again until he finally stabbed the demon knight in the stomach, defeating him. As the demon knight died, he transformed back into Vortigern. With Vortigern's death, the magic tower also collapsed. In the end, Arthur was crowned king. He made Bedivere and his friends his trusted advisors at the Round Table. Arthur became a wise and beloved king, and so the story of King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, comes to an end. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is if a giant snake shows up, let it handle your problems, and always keep a magical sword handy, cause you never know when you'll need to defeat an evil uncle.